Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, March 21st, 2018. It's a snow day here in the greater Washington, D.C. area. And what a snow day it is. Kids are home. Everybody's home, as a matter of fact. Work is canceled. The show's canceled. Do not congratulate me. I didn't have anything to do with it. Daily Co's Radio, though, is live now despite the snow. KagroX, that's me. Hi. So you can reach me on Twitter, by the way, in case you were ever interested in changing the direction of the show, or my morning comments that Bill scripts for me very carefully, and I sometimes wander off of. As a matter of fact, this was a tweeted script right here, and I've already exceeded the length of any, even the expanded 280-character tweets. What was he going to say? Ah, yes, KagroX, David Waldman, hi, is the mastermind behind a twisted and evil campaign to bring sanity, wit, and accurate information to internet radio. I didn't even realize that. That's an excellent script. I should keep that. Do not congratulate. Please don't do that. And also, there's all sorts of things we should do not do, and I was just thinking about that. That's a crazy story. We'll get to that. Of course, I'm sure you've heard about that one already. I'm wondering, I wanted to sneak into the Trump Hotel and change out all the do not disturb signs for disturb, but I didn't manage to make it downtown here because of the snow. It's got the roads all clogged up. I'm sure things are even worse in Connecticut, but Greg Dworkin due to join us soon via Skype, which doesn't really care whether it's snowing or not, but we'll get a weather report from further up north up the coast. The coastal elite weather report, I guess. The news this morning, varied and mixed, and we wake up to the news that I am hoping that this means that the string of bombings in Austin is over. The suspect, anyway, behind this series of bombings is dead. It was found out, tracked by the police, found in a parking lot somewhere inside of a van, and I guess that's just sort of the bomber uniform. You got to get a van. Can't be a proper bomber without a van. Anyway, he was cornered and blew himself up, presumably intentionally, because he was a pretty adept at he was bomb adept, I guess Donald Trump would have said, and the police were closing in on him. But he set off a bomb in his van, and then the SWAT team that had surrounded him fired into the van, and I guess technically speaking, they're not sure what did the most damage and who killed who in this thing. But I guess to almost no one's surprise, it turns out to be a 24-year-old white guy. Not terribly shocking. Greg has collected better and more comprehensive information as of earlier this morning, I can see, on the list of items he has up for discussion. We will find out what we know about this guy and what he was up to. We know this already. Right-wing Twitter has already essentially soiled itself, and it's sort of a constant state of affairs for these guys, over this event and this string of bombings. Most infamously, I guess this morning, so far anyway, most infamously, a guy by the name of Chad Prather, which caused many, including Darth, the famous Darth among us, to just simply laugh at the fact that the guy was going by the name Chad these days. I don't know who the guy is. He's got a verified Twitter check mark and at least 2 cowboy hats. I can tell by his profile, because his avatar picture is him smiling in a large gray cowboy hat, but his profile picture, the profile page, is him smiling in a large brown cowboy hat. And so the button-down cowboy-style shirts also in abundance at the Prather household, apparently. He tweets under the name of Watch Chad. Watch him what? Well, he apparently filmed something called the Chad Prather Show from Podcast One, whatever that is. I should know a little bit more about it. It's a podcast, but I guess he videotapes it's a video podcast, I suppose. And it might be about hats. I can't really tell otherwise, but he seems to be a Texas kind of guy. And I guess as such, he was moved to tweet about this thing last night, perhaps before the news broke that the bomber was dead. I don't know what time that happened. Where are the marches and protests for bomb control in Austin? He asks. He is capably answered by many. He is foolishly answered by still more, of course, saying, yeah, where are those marches? And, of course, the most capable answer so far, I think, has been from Matthew Chapman, who himself is photographed in his Twitter avatar wearing, you'll never guess, a large cowboy hat, because he too is from Texas, and I guess that's mandatory. His is black, and so we've got a lot, all the colors of the rainbow covered in, as far as cowboy hats go, black, brown, and gray. I do think that they make them in other colors, but in Texas, the gents are wearing only 3 that I can verify for you. And he very aptly answers, we have bomb control, you idiot. And that, I think, is fully warranted. You can't buy them in stores. Manufacturers have strict liability, and building them is incredibly hard. That's why this skilled serial bomber can only kill 3 people in 2 weeks, but a teenager could kill 17 people in minutes with an AR-15. And I think that's probably the most shocking stat of them all. Typically speaking, ask, I don't know, kids who play war. Ask actual folks in the armed services. Just ask anybody on the street, what's the more deadly weapon, a gun or a bomb? But we've gotten to a point where somebody who, in as much as anybody can be said to have access to bombs, he can manage to kill 3 people in 2 weeks. Terrible, terrifying, yes, but really not even, it's nothing compared to what you can do with a handgun, but let alone the handguns. AR-15's an entirely different story. I mean, it's like the guy didn't notice that you could shoot 600 people in 10 minutes if you were, white and had a bunch of AR-15s and were staked out above a country music festival, which, by the way, an abundance of those hats, almost certainly, at the festival. And it availed no one anything. But it's really a good point being made here by Matthew Chapman. We can pore over it perhaps a little bit later. But why not take advantage of the situation we have here with having Greg Dworkin with us? How's the snow today, Greg?
It may be a little bit less than they predicted. It's hard to tell. We're supposed to get a nor'easter. We're going to get anywhere between 1 inch and 30 inches, and hard to tell.
How can you say that you might get less than?
Well, it depends whether the storm goes south or north. I think the coast of Connecticut will get hit. We're inland. I'm not sure how much we're going to get. They seem to have downgraded a little bit, but it's a nor'easter. That means there's winds. It's going to be a very wet, heavy snow for those of you not familiar with winter.
Yes.
Snow doesn't always fall the same way. Sometimes it's a light powder, great for skiing. Go to Utah for that. Sometimes it's a wet, heavy, I don't want to shovel this snow. It's time to hire 10-year-olds. And if you already have damaged trees and such, even a light snowfall with a little bit of wind can be damaging. So it's supposed to start, we get snow showers till about noon. About 1 o'clock, we get some heavier snow. We'll see how much. We don't know yet.
Yeah, ours is already
But it's not going to interfere with the show, which is the important thing.
I mean, sort of good. I mean, I got my kids have the day off. I kind of would. Why couldn't interfere with the radio show? I don't know. But it's an all indoor activity, so we're okay. And
we have power. That's the whole thing. So as long as we have power, we're good.
I just went out and cut the cables, but it didn't work. All right.
Didn't work, eh? So what do we know? We know that guy was a 24-year-old white dude. He was found because police obtained surveillance images of him at the FedEx store, plus they put together some of the things that he was buying. He was MacGyvering bombs, and they were able to trace some local store stuff. They ID'd his car. They spotted it at a hotel near Austin. They went to check on him, and then the bomb went off. I'm not exactly sure how. It's unclear whether he lived in the Austin area, and nobody really knows his motive. Lots of reports of things seen on Reddit, but, unconfirmed and unverified.
Yeah, that was another of sort of the interesting aspects of, one of the bombings is it appeared at an earlier stage, and I don't know how it played out at the very end, but it certainly appeared that he was targeting minorities and perhaps black families, prominent black families in the Austin area. That's why I was sort of surprised also to see Chad, whoever he was, calling for marches for bomb control. I didn't think he should get too far out of it.
Well, he didn't. Chad didn't really want marches for bomb control. He just wanted to give libtards a hard time because they march for gun control.
Right. I just was sort of surprised to find Chad out there calling for marches to call for greater regard for black lives, as though they mattered to him.
Well, it's more along the lines of, why aren't we calling for knife safety regulation?
I'm happy with that one. Sure.
Yeah, why not? And actually, come to think of it, and you've used this analogy before, I think, given what happened this week, I mean, after all, last week we were talking about the fact that cars don't kill people, people kill people. But this week, you know what? Cars kill people.
Yes, that's true, too.
Why aren't we regulating that?
People are asking for marches on that, too. And everyone is so tongue-in-cheek when it comes to people other than them being killed.
Right.
It's
so anyway, we'll find out more about the Austin guy. But the question is, did he really want to burn it all down? Was he a terrorist? Was he a I'm sure right-wing media, social media, as soon as something like this happens, the first thing they post without knowing anything, because it's fake news and you have to get it out there, is he must have been a Democrat. Must have voted for him.
Oh, almost certainly. Yeah, we're already
that's almost the first thing they always post. I don't know why. It generally turns out not to be true, but it wouldn't matter anyway. That's not the point, really.
Right. Well, everyone will try to assign some motive to him, and why? I don't know why they would think anyone would believe that as a motive. But,
I don't know. Okay. But speaking of motives and dead guys, there's another dead guy we should talk about a little bit. Just do lightning rounds before we get into Cambridge Analytica and psychological testing, and that is another dead guy, Peter Peterson.
Yes, he did. He did. I read that last night, and somebody noted that. Congratulations were in order, I guess, for Social Security for outliving him.
Exactly. A Blackstone Group co-founder. He was the stone part of it. The black part of it was his co-founder, and that's where the name came from. And there's a profile of him, I guess, in the Washington Post, which was kind of interesting. The reason for death was not disclosed. I figure he probably died worrying about the national debt.
That could be it. I don't know.
Some of Mr. Peterson's proposals, the article says, cutting Social Security benefits for the wealthy, for instance, or eliminating the mortgage interest deduction, long cherished by middle-class homeowners, have been seen as political third rails. But he was credited, so the way to get around that is you only do it in blue states. But he was credited with daring to say what others in positions of influence would not. Then there's another piece here. It says he got his revenge because his family used to dress him in traditional Greek garb and then send him to school where he could be ridiculed by his friends. Oh. He got his revenge by finishing at the top of his high school class in 1943, too nearsighted for military service. In World War II, he enrolled at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a place I'm familiar with. But he soon decided he was not cut out to be an engineer and quit MIT when he faced suspension for cheating on a term paper.
Oh.
So, the delightfulness of his personality goes back way, way to his past.
Well, that's some revenge.
He transferred to Northwestern, which is just down the block there.
That's revenge,
where
too.
He had a social life rich with beer, women, and occasional debauchery, as he put it. So that's Pete Peterson.
Okay. Well, congratulations. Not in order.
Sounds like a fun guy,
Well, yeah.
I'm going to cut your Social Security, have a beer.
Yeah. Well,
on you.
Please, too generous.
I mean, if I did it on me, I wouldn't be a rich guy, but,
I don't know. It's odd figure, to say the least. Yeah. But a rich life, literally, and a long one, now over. So there you have it.
Now over. Another death, which we should report. This is the Death Watch.
It's the obituaries.
Report here, the obit thing. Is an illustrator named Robert Grossman. And I have a piece from the New York Times at the very top with one of his more famous illustrations. It's a picture of Richard Nixon with a very long nose. And sitting on the end of his nose is Henry Kissinger as Jiminy Cricket. It's actually a very, very good piece. I remember that back in the day. He also did the movie poster for Airplane, the movie, where the plane is tied in a knot.
Yes. I recognize that.
You may know his work, even though you don't know his work. And it was a nice paragraph at the end of the obit in the New York Times. Grossman gave an interview in 2008, and he said, reporters label under the terrible requirement that what they report must be true. Opinion writers need to endure the less stringent demand that what they opine be at least plausible. Unless you're David Brooks. Nobody ever expects what cartoonists do to be either true or plausible. That's why we're all as happy as larks.
I guess so. Well, life well lived there then.
Yeah, so that was all good. But in addition to the serial stuff in Austin, and of course, and all these poor people seeming to die just, so we could round them up.
Thanks.
This Cambridge Analytica stuff is a bigger and bigger and bigger story. And, I'll skip for now the trilogy, the Stormy Daniels, Karen McDougal, the apprentice person, the trilogy, as they go ahead and sue Trump. That's going to wend its way through the courts. But right now,
exciting. The
big story is this Cambridge Analytica stuff, and on several fronts. And I found a pretty good summary of what's going on here.
Good.
With Cambridge Analytica that I want to go over. We talked about it on Monday, and I thought it was going to be a big story, and that's how come we spent so much time on it going into the weeds. And it turns out it was a big story, so I'm glad we did that.
Right. I even spent Tuesday on it, and we're still not done.
Yeah, so I missed the Tuesday show, so I don't know what part of it you covered.
Me neither.
And I was there. But Michael Simon, who did a lot of work for Obama at the time, just pointed out that what the Obama administration did and what Cambridge Analytica did were not the same. And so you can't just step back and say, oh, well, it was, you guys did the same thing. We just did the same thing. Not true.
Yeah,
so let me talk a little bit about that. I mean, I have a piece specifically on that called No, Obama Didn't Employ the Same Strategies as Cambridge Analytica by Nancy Letourneau, which is in the Washington Monthly. But let's talk about what they did do. And this piece comes from Lawfare. Andrew Keene Woods, the Cambridge Analytica Facebook debacle, a legal primer. And I don't know if I even have that on the list for you, so I'll put it at the very bottom where it's easy for you to find.
Yes, thank you.
It is. And here's the thing, because I thought it was pretty good about playing it all out. On March 17th, the New York Times revealed that Cambridge Analytica, the British data analysis firm with ties to Mercer, Bannon, and it was hired by the Trump campaign, and by the way, a lot of other Republican campaigns, including Ted Cruz,
Roy Blunt.
I mean, there's a number of them. Harvested private information from the Facebook profiles of more than 50 million users without their permission.
Oops.
This set off a firestorm in the U.S. and U.K. as regulators announced they would get to the bottom of what went wrong. Senator Ron Wyden asked Facebook a series of hard-hitting questions. Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey announced an investigation, followed by the New York Attorney General, and UK's Information Commissioner Elizabeth Denham said she would seek a warrant to search Cambridge Analytica's computers. Interestingly there, her office also went into Cambridge Analytica and kicked the Facebook people out who were there.
Yes. Didn't expect to see them.
So they said, nope, you're out of here. It's
Panama City and London.
That was kind of fun. This, in turn, sent Facebook stock plunging down nearly 7% by the market's close on Monday. I attribute that to our show.
Yes,
and down nearly another 2 points on Tuesday. And we don't know what's going to happen today because markets don't open until 9:30. On Monday night, the New York Times revealed that Facebook's chief security officer, Alex Stamos, is stepping down after much internal disagreement with the way the firm handled concerns about misinformation in the 2016 election. Perhaps since this article was written, Alexander Nix, the CEO, has been either suspended or fired. I'm not sure which.
Reports are suspended, but also there are other reports we'll talk about later that say really neither. That was both pronunciations.
Right, either. A breach of trust, if not a computer, says this article. The data that Cambridge Analytica obtained seems to have come from Alexander Kogan. Remember the guy also known as Dr. Spectre? A researcher at Cambridge University who convinced hundreds of thousands of Facebook users to take a Facebook-linked personality quiz. Not the Myers-Briggs stuff that you and I talk about a lot.
Different. True.
Different. This is something called the Ocean Personality Assessment. I'll get to that. Thereby granting Kogan access through Facebook's developer platform to a treasure trove of user data. Kogan then shared this information with Cambridge Analytica. This was reported as a breach in the Times, which prompted security experts to explain this was categorically distinct from the kind of breach Equifax suffered, for example, where an intruder would go in and take stuff, my summary. Kogan's access to the data, if not his later use, was known to Facebook and seemingly consistent with their Developer Application Programming Interface, or API, at the time. This is how Kogan was able to access 50 million user profiles through only a few 100,000 quiz takers. You take the quiz, and 1,000 of your closest friends also get scooped up or scraped, as they like to say. Yes. Harvested, other people say. Facebook's chief security officer, Stamos, pointed this out in a now gone tweet.
Now already gone.
Incorrect to call it a breach, he said. Well, actually, it's a breach.
Okay. Well,
anyway.
It's a breach of ethics and trust, certainly. We've got that.
In other words, Facebook says, don't worry, Cambridge Analytica didn't steal the data. We gave it to them.
Well, that makes things nice and neat. Just arrest the rest of you.
And they were. As Ben Thompson notes, an old Facebook developer page shows their API would allow developers to access not only the user account information, but huge amounts of friend user account information, things like friends' interests, friends' religion, friends' politics, and much, much more. Okay, so this developer page is now down, but it shows that Dr. Spector, Kogan, didn't need to get Facebook data through the back door. I think this one is. There were two guys. I think this is the one that was Dr. Spector, but I have to check. Because he could waltz in through the front door, the door Facebook built for developers. And this wasn't a breach of Facebook's network. It was a breach of user trust.
There we go. See?
So then they go into which laws might apply and how that might be a problem. But basically, there's a fantastic article which goes back to here's the date.
1700.
November 19th, 2016, by Mackenzie Funk.
Really?
In the New York Times, called Cambridge Analytica and the Secret Agenda of a Facebook Quiz.
Oh, okay.
And they talk more specifically about exactly what it was that they were doing.
All right, I'm going to take a look at this one. That sounds familiar. You already sent that. Yeah, okay.
If you've ever answered questions like these on one of the free personality quizzes floating around Facebook, you'll have learned what's known as your Ocean Score, how you rate according to the big 5 psychological traits of openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. It may also be responsible the next time America is shocked by an election upset.
Okay. He perked up Donald Trump's ears there, but it's neuroticism, Donald.
Right. For several years, a data firm eventually hired by the Trump campaign, Cambridge Analytica, remember this was written in November 2016, has been using Facebook as a tool to build psychological profiles that represents some 230 million adult Americans. Yes. A spin-off of a British consulting company, sometimes defense contractor, known for its counterterrorism psyops work in Afghanistan. The firm does so by seeding the social network with personality quizzes. Respondents, by now hundreds of thousands of us, mostly female, mostly young, but enough male and older for the firm to make inferences, gets a free look at their Ocean Score, and then Cambridge Analytica gets a look at their scores, and thanks to Facebook, gains access to the profiles, their real names, and then all this other information. Okay? So they talk about the fact that the ad business that Facebook has is based on the ability to sell and micro-target information, and it raises the question of exactly what are they collecting and who do they give it to. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about what an Ocean Personality Assessment actually looks like.
Okay.
So I sent a link to you. It's called testonthenet.com. It's interesting. Ocean Personality Assessment. If you're familiar, you can skip the introduction and go straight to the report. But it starts out, the very first thing they say, important. This report contains personal information, should be treated confidentially and responsibly. It must always be considered in the context of all available information about the individual concerned. Think about this disclaimer in terms of when you and I were just talking about the Myers-Briggs test and how people actually wrote in and sent you segments about how it should not be used by HR.
Yeah.
Right? It's not to be used to discriminate. It's just to be used to inform yourself if you wish to use it at all. It must always be considered in the context of all available information about the individual concerned. For example, interests and goals, established potential skills and aptitudes, past achievements, biodata, current options open to the individual concerned, observed behavior, references. No decision should be based solely on the information contained in this report. The report is submitted on the understanding that it'll be used in an ethical manner, treated as strictly confidential, and that the contents will not be disclosed to any unauthorized third party. That's where they start their page with that.
It gets only more complicated from there.
But it gives you an idea of what they call the big five factors: openness to experience, conscientiousness or work ethic, extroversion, agreeableness, and natural reactions like, are you more likely to be anxious, angry, hostile, moody, content? Are you self-indulgent, self-conscious, sensitivity to stress? That's all in the natural reactions. Things, the agreeableness kind of is straightforward, speaks for itself. The work ethic part, orderliness, sense of responsibility, achievement striving, self-discipline, deliberateness, and open to experience, things like artistic interest, depths of emotions, willingness to experiment, intellectual curiosity, tolerance for diversity. You could see where if you have detailed stuff here, that it would really be able to tell folks a whole lot about who you are. Openness to experience. They ask things about whether you're a traditionalist, down to earth. How do you identify these words? Do you like them? Do you not like them?
Okay.
For extroverts, are you formal? Are you serious? Are you quiet? Do you prefer working alone? Are you hard-headed, skeptical, competitive? It really is a very, very detailed profile. Now, if you do this and you give that information to them, that's semi-useful. But if they then know exactly who you are so that they could micro-target you and send you ads that are, based on what you said, because they've identified the people who, for example, are most likely to be good test cases for Steve Bannon's idea of drain the swamp. This is terrific information that people can use, and that's how they're true.
Yeah, well, this is an amazing development. I'm glad we're getting all these details about these things, and it feels like we've hit some of these issues before. In fact, when we return, we'll talk a little bit about that next. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring, monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Greg Dworkin still with me, still parsing through the vast amounts of data, because that's what the story is about, relating to Cambridge Analytica. I was checking, and I just before the break found, I had a sneaking suspicion about this one, but this particular New York Times article that we're in the middle of now, from November of 2016, at least turns up in the archives of my saved pocket articles. So I'm trying to check back to see how long ago really did we first take notice of this connection between the personality tests and Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. It does feel like, if you've been listening to the show for a long time, this story has been a long time in coming, and a lot of this information was dug up earlier, but rapidly developing now. Welcome. We're back in the tuberculosis ward here at KITM headquarters. Hi,
sunshine and fresh air is really the best treatment.
All right, everybody outside into the snow.
Exactly right. So, a lot of the sanitariums were built on the sides of hills, and hilltops exactly for that reason. So, in any case, there's a couple of different aspects of here that I think are just worthwhile highlighting. For example, number one, the Cambridge Analytica people have been on a series of newscasts on Channel 4 in the UK, where the CEO, Alexander Nix, was interviewed by some undercover reporters posing as clients, potential clients, talking about how their worldwide actions might be able to influence elections. And they talked about using Ukrainian girls as something that you would film an opposing politician and then
yes,
keep that
right.
in their pocket in case they needed to put pressure on you, for example, to not criticize Vladimir Putin or whatever. Not that anything like that happened in the Trump campaign. But, some of our friends, Dana Hoyle and others who are experienced with some of these data mining operations that are legitimately used in political campaigns remind us that folks like Cambridge Analytica who are trying to sell their product will often exaggerate the ability of what they have and their reach, making themselves sound much better than they actually are or more adept than they are, just so that they could sell you a product. So it's not like, oh my gosh, these are like political, scientific, psychological puppet masters who can manipulate everybody around the world. Maybe a lot of it is a little bit overblown just so they can sell you stuff.
Could be.
Worth keeping that in mind. And again, it is worth separating out two completely different things. When the scientist who claimed to be doing research took all the data and then sold it to other people,
Yes.
Cambridge Analytica, in terms of how they were using the information, is one set of things to talk about. And the very fact that Facebook's business model is built on scraping all this data is yet another thing to talk about. So they really should be separate. Now, whether they come together in the end, how would that happen? Well, Cambridge Analytica actually had separate organizations or business clients that hired them. There was a outside third-party Trump group, one of these America First things,
Okay.
and then there was the Trump campaign. And, of course, you're not allowed to coordinate those things.
Yes, not supposed to.
But since Cambridge Analytica was basically unethically using the data, did they? And then did Facebook know about all of this? And sure, it's separate, and Facebook's business model of selling data to people is how they make all their billions of dollars, but maybe that's not a good model. But were there people at Facebook who knew about this and who knew about the fact that this has been going on for 2 years and didn't really care because it looked like they can make a lot of money doing that, so they looked the other way? Or whether people at Facebook who wanted Trump elected. I mean, we don't know the answers to any of that stuff. I'm not saying that those are answers, but, the questions that are worth looking at. But in order to get to the bottom of this very complex web of who knew what and who worked for whom, you really have to look at them separately and then tie it up together at the end.
Well, there'll be a lot to dig through.
And, there's going to be a lot of digging.
Yeah,
now, there are people who have said
government doing it too.
that if you're looking at Robert Mueller's investigation and you really want to talk about collusion, the only way to do that is to look at Cambridge Analytica, which is a firm that Steve Bannon was involved with and which was paid for by the Mercers.
Yes.
Talking about webs. So it's all tied up. It's all, similar kind of questions, more questions than answers. But it's not conspiracy theory to say there was something fishy going on here. It's really worth looking at. And apparently there are attorneys general who are doing this in the states, and presumably Congress. And, there are people in Congress who want to look at this. But I guess the way things work is that, for example, Grassley's judiciary chair.
Yes.
And the chair is the one that has to decide who gets subpoenaed. So people like John Kennedy, Louisiana Republican, who thinks this ought to be looked at, or Amy Klobuchar, can say, I really think this needs to be looked at, but if the chair doesn't agree, then you don't get your subpoenas. I guess that's how it works.
Well, it depends on, each committee has its own separate rules, but generally speaking, if the chair
those
is
two
against
were saying
you.
that's how it works with Grassley, so they have to convince Grassley it's an issue.
In almost all cases, it's extraordinarily difficult to do anything at all without the chair's agreement. But
we can't do that in the House Intelligence Committee because Devin Nunes won't agree to anything. But see, the whole thing is now it becomes partisan, because if you actually look, you may find out that the Republicans were cheating, and so now they don't want to. So that's part of the reason why it's hard to imagine Congress is going to police itself on this.
Yes, and as we learn, as we did a few minutes ago, that they're now able to figure out exactly how many Republican members of Congress worked with or in conjunction with somehow Cambridge Analytica along the way. I mean, like, is Roy Blunt now going to vote to investigate Cambridge Analytica and everything to do with it? Probably not.
Well, right. And so, the story from the Republican side is, Cambridge Analytica is not that effective. The point is you had to hire them to work for you if you want access to Mercer money.
Yes, and that's equally...
Which, by the way, in and of
precious.
itself is pretty scandalous.
Yeah.
But in the scale of things, well, that's not that bad.
Right, sure. That's it's a lot less than the treason we were just talking about a minute ago.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's it's very weird, and of course, a related phenomenon now is going back and deflating all those articles about Jared Kushner being the boy wonder, the online genius who put together the shocker victory that sweeps Trump into the White House thanks to his digital acumen and his recognition of the value of what Cambridge Analytica does. When that was enough, when that was getting him headlines, that was huge. When it's getting him, possibly brought before a grand jury, I don't know who they are. I didn't do anything.
I'm a genius. I just, understood all this way better than all the political professionals, and I put together on the fly in a real cheap way this whole digital operation that just revolutionized everything. That stuff was illegal, immoral, unethical, and actually it's being under investigation now in several different countries. Right. I had nothing to do with it. I didn't even know about it.
I don't have a computer.
Who these guys are. I never heard of Stephen Bannon.
What am I doing here? My name is Barack Obama. Let me go. Anything that he can say.
Exactly. So because of the snow threat, I'm going to have to leave a little bit early. But I think that's a pretty good summary of all of this.
I think so.
Psychological testing is best left for the professionals. If you want to use it as a fun thing, that's fine. But don't be stealing people's data, okay? The other thing that I want to leave you with is a completely different story that we haven't covered, but just it gets buried in all of this.
Okay.
I left you a Mother Jones article about the Chris Kobach trial. Chris Kobach trial?
Yes.
The title is great. Chris Kobach just got humiliated in federal court. The Kansas Secretary of State wanted to prove his claims of widespread voter fraud. Instead, he was repeatedly embarrassed. So that's a really good story. And as a matter of fact, I think, let's see if I could find it for you. I believe, let's see, this may take a few minutes. Come on, there we go. I put together a tweet storm from Jessica Huseman, who was covering the trial. Who minute by minute was talking about the humiliation. So I'm going to leave that with you in case you want to take a look at that too. So that's there. That's the unrolled thread from Jessica Huseman. And here is the story from Mother Jones about the Kobach. Is that how he pronounces it? Kobach?
I don't know. I don't know whether we really should ever try to figure out. I don't know. I think I was saying Kobach.
That's the buckle.
I don't know that Kobach or Kobach. I'm not sure.
Yeah, robot. So there's those two pieces. I'll leave those with you if you find them of interest. But in the meantime, I'll just scoot out for now and say there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. And if you listen to Kagro in the morning, you'll find that some of it is not that surprising because you've at least heard of these people, heard of this stuff. If you want to talk about other things, there's the Illinois primary yesterday.
Yes.
Interesting information
Didn't
there.
get to that.
The usual suspects won, but there's still implications for what happens later on. I'll leave that to you as well. But this is Greg Dworkin signing off with my good friend David Waldman. Kagro in the morning. Thanks so much for listening, folks. And I myself will be back tomorrow because I'm trying to keep track of what day of the week it is.
Okay, this is one of the best ways to do it.
Yep.
Thanks very much, Greg. Okay. That is a good one. I think I did put away that Mother Jones article too, but I'll take a look at that. And the tweet storm from inside the courtroom. We did mention it, and I know I read another entry in the portfolio there on the Kobach debacle, I guess, depending on how you want to pronounce his name and every other word in the English language. But yeah, that really that did not go well for him. And I was interested in this one in particular because Ari Berman had written this one, and I thought he had done a pretty good job in covering things all along the way. Does it say it? I mean, I don't know whether it brings up anything new. I loved, of course, the example of asking him the question, asking the Kobach experts about whether or not the certain ethnic sounding names would trigger their investigations, and then, of course, the name being used, actually the name of another sitting federal court judge right there in that very court building. I think Ari goes a little bit more in depth here, but we should take a look at all of the materials available to us. I'm still trying to figure out where and at what point on which date in particular, we read through this story of Cambridge Analytica, but to no avail so far. But certainly, I guess the fact that it made it into Pocket and it made it into the archives. I only archive things usually after I've used them on the show, and even if they're terribly outdated, but I never did get to use them, I've kept them in the other side of the main queue of Pocket in the hopes that one day I will get to them. But it'll be very interesting to see how early on we were able to pick this story out as key, although I don't know that I ever knew that it would blow up quite this big. It's been very interesting. Let's take a look at the Ari Berman piece, though, in Mother Jones. Chris Kobach just got humiliated in federal court because you can't humiliate that guy enough. The Kansas Secretary of State wanted to prove his claims of widespread voter fraud and said he was repeatedly embarrassed. That published yesterday. Judge Julie Robinson was losing patience. That's good. She should be losing patience with him. Before the 2016 election, she had ordered Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach to restore the right to vote to thousands of Kansans who'd been disenfranchised by a state law requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote. You remember this from yesterday. Although I don't think we got the detail about this same judge having previously ordered Kobach to reinstate these people's right to vote. On Tuesday, Kobach was again in her courtroom, this time at the tail end of an 8-day trial, challenging the proof of citizenship law, in which the ACLU was also asking Robinson to hold Kobach in contempt of court for declining to tell those voters that they were once again eligible to vote. I made it clear they're fully registered voters, she told Kobach, pounding on her desk for emphasis. Now, I'd like to see where this leads to, because, of course, contempt of court, I mean, if you're ordered by a federal judge or any judge to do something and are unsuccessful in getting the order blocked or overturned in some way, and you still refuse to comply with the order, if you're held in contempt of court, you could be fined, sure, but you could also be jailed. And wouldn't that be wonderful to see? Kobach's battle against the ACLU was supposed to be a showcase for his claims of widespread voter fraud. When he ran for Kansas Secretary of State in 2010, Kobach said the illegal registration of alien voters has become pervasive. Pervasive, that's some language. That led Kansas to pass the law requiring people to provide documentation, including a birth certificate, passport, or naturalization papers, to register to vote. The law prevented 35,000 Kansans from registering between 2013 and 2016. Instead, the trial devolved into a comedy of errors, with Kobach's witnesses frequently contradicting his claims or getting humiliated by pointed questions they couldn't answer. Kobach, who led President Donald Trump's Election Integrity Commission, which is a sick joke all by itself, and is now running for governor, and I mean, he's like a legitimate candidate and everything. It's amazing. Hired Hans von Spakovsky of the Heritage Foundation now to support his claim that illegal votes by non-citizens had swung U.S. elections. But under questioning from ACLU lawyer Dale Ho, von Spakovsky admitted he couldn't name a single election where votes by non-citizens had decided the outcome. Remember, he's there to support the claim that illegal votes by non-citizens had swung U.S. elections. And basically the question to him is, oh yeah, name one. And he says, I don't know of any, because there aren't any. Kobach cited Jesse Richman, a professor of political science at Old Dominion University, to defend the charge that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote in 2016 because of millions of illegal votes. But when Ho asked Richman if illegal votes had provided the margin for Clinton, Richmond said, what would you expect him to say? If you've brought him as your witness, you'd expect him to say yes, but he in fact said no. Richmond produced a study for Kobach last year alleging that as many as 18,000 non-citizens were registered to vote in Kansas. However, the study offered evidence of only 6 non-citizens who attempted to register. So I'd say you're playing fast and loose with your standards there now. Your evidence, sir, proves how many non-citizens attempted to register in Kansas? 6. And you're saying, though, I'm looking at your report doesn't say 6, does it? What, could you read this number out for us? What number of non-citizens were registered to vote in Kansas according to your report? That would be 18,000. Now that's larger than 6, isn't it? It is. By approximately 18,000, give or take, say 6, right? Yeah, I guess, I mean, I don't know if their lawyer had as much fun cross-examining with this as I might have, or as I like to imagine I might have, because it's not always typically very good, very effective courtroom demeanor. You don't want to alienate the jury by, in case any of them thought, or maybe read an article at some point alleging this 18,000 number and spent some time believing it. Yeah, you got to worry about the possibility of embarrassing them without ever finding out about it. So, still, though, in a perfect world, you'd get to ask the questions this way. Richmond admitted in court that he didn't know if they had succeeded in registering or voting. And the methodology Richmond used to identify non-citizen voters was deeply flawed. He simply flagged people with, quote, foreign-sounding names. That's who this was. Remember that guy? We talked about him yesterday. I didn't realize what else he had done here. Although he was inconsistent in his execution. As Talking Points memo reported, 2 respondents with the last name Lopez were coded as foreign, and 3 Lopez's were not. George Lopez, I guess, got through on that one. On the 6th day of the trial, Ho read a series of names and asked Richmond if he would label them as foreign-sounding, and when he came to the name of Carlos Murguia, Richmond said he probably would flag it as foreign. That, of course, the name of the federal judge sitting in that very courthouse. Over and over, the claims of voter fraud offered by Kobach and his witnesses collapsed under scrutiny, as they always did. But it was interesting to catch them all and gather them all in one place and do them one at a time, one after the other. Kobach asked Tabitha Lehman, the clerk of Sedgwick County, Kansas, to share a spreadsheet showing that 38 non-citizens in the county had registered or attempted to register. Okay, Ms. Lehman, will you please come in here and share that spreadsheet? Under questioning, though, from the ACLU, Lehman conceded that only 5 of them had voted over the past 2 decades, when 1.3 million votes were cast in the county. Kobach has often said that the evidence of fraud he's uncovered in Kansas is only, quote, the tip of the iceberg. A great rhetorical trick, right? It's just the tip of the iceberg, Your Honor. In his closing argument, Ho said, the iceberg, on close inspection, Your Honor, it's more of an ice cube. To rebut Kobach, the ACLU presented voters who had been prevented from registering by the law. And it wouldn't be that difficult to demonstrate the discriminatory effect of the law. I mean, once you get the other people to admit things like, well, let's see, how many people actually registered to vote, or voted for that matter, over the last 10 years? If the answer is 5, can I find 6 people who were illegally prevented, improperly prevented from voting? Probably. And then you can say, well, on balance, your law is pretty stupid, considering that there are actually 30-something thousand people last year who were prevented from voting, whereas even if you had had your way all along, only 5 people would properly have been prevented from voting over 10 years. That's not much of a balancing test. So, to rebut Kobach, as we said, ACLU presented voters who had been prevented from voting, or registering rather, by law. One was Charles Stricker III, very foreign sounding, a hotel manager in Wichita who brought 3 forms of ID to the DMV when he attempted to register, but was blocked from doing so because he didn't show proof of citizenship. Ho said that preventing thousands from registering because of only a few suspected cases of non-citizen voting was like taking a bazooka to a fly. And, of course, not actually just taking a bazooka, like, here you go, fly, I've brought you a bazooka. He means shooting the fly with the bazooka. I don't know why they would say it that way, but okay, I get it's a much more dramatic rendering. Okay. Robinson, who was appointed to the federal district court in Kansas in 2001 by President George W. Bush, huge Democrat, of course. On Fox News, they'll tell you, George W. Bush, D, right, was having none of Kobach's creative courtroom maneuvers. Earlier in the trial, she castigated Kobach for attempting to introduce evidence that was not properly submitted to the court. And I guess you probably know by now, you can't do that. We're not going to have a trial by ambush here, she told him, lecturing Kobach on what she called Evidence 101. And you remember, I'm sorry that Ari left that story out. You remember that one from yesterday's retelling, that he basically missed the deadline for submitting this evidence for consideration and wanted to enter it into evidence anyway. And no, I'm sorry, the deadline has passed. And good question here. How does it feel to have your paperwork out of order, Mr. Kobach? Now you're not allowed to enter the evidence that you thought was so crucial in your case because you screwed up. You messed up the paperwork, and one additional hurdle cost you your right to have your day in court, I guess. That's terrible. How distressing that must be for you. All right. Let's take a quick look at the other items sent along here, including the unrolled thread that Greg sent us from Jessica Husman, who was covering the trial. In about 10 minutes, she begins. There will be a contempt hearing in ACLU v. Kobach over whether Kobach appropriately complied with the preliminary injunction ordered in May of 2016. I wondered what happened with that, which required him to fully register thousands placed on the suspense list. Is it suspense or suspended? I don't know, but that was tweeted as suspense list for not showing proof of citizenship. Once again, just to stress what was going on here, that she brings up here and that Ari brought up in the case of the guy with the not at all foreign sounding name. He brought 3 forms of ID, but none of them were proof of citizenship. In other words, if you showed up with your driver's license and, let's say, your birth certificate and, I don't know, a pay stub with your current address on it, right? It was what very often they will ask for when you're registering. That would tend to do the trick, particularly if you're, John Smith IV or whatever, right? No obvious reason to question your citizenship. And of course, you are signing a form that declares that under penalty of perjury, you are attesting to your own citizenship, and you can be punished even without this stupid law for registering when you're a non-citizen. But if you bring those forms of ID, very common forms of ID, the forms of ID usually that will get you registered to vote in any other state, you can still be blocked from registering because none of them say that you are a citizen, either natural born or naturalized, of the United States. You would have to bring either naturalization papers or a passport if you have one. But if you don't have one, what have you got? If you don't have a passport and you're a natural born citizen, what proofs of your citizenship have you got? I suppose a birth certificate should do the trick. But I don't know that it would necessarily be accepted by, idiots who want to exclude you from voting in the first place based on something which they might be able to detect in you just by, say, looking at you or looking at your last name. But technically speaking, they should know the state of the law and the state of our constitutional government, that a person born in the United States would have natural or birthright citizenship. But if the document doesn't itself attest to citizenship, it might not be accepted. Anyway, the ACLU's motion for contempt is embedded herein. And let's see what Jessica Husman had to say about proceedings from that point. This trial has been drawn out so long it was supposed to be 4 days, and they were already on day 8 by that point, that this contempt hearing has gotten its very own day. Optics, I'm sure Kobach would have preferred to avoid. The court has recessed for 10 minutes because there is intense confusion over evidence Kobach is attempting to submit in his own defense. Prior to this confusion, Sue Becker offered an opening statement, and the judge erupted at her and Kobach's team. She said they'd repeatedly participated in gamesmanship in front of the court. The judge also snapped at Kobach, who told her his office can only make sure counties, quote, abide by the law and not much else. This is the law, she said, referencing her previous rulings. This has been fascinating. This hearing was supposed to take minutes. Something is also bubbling in the hallway. ACLU lawyers have been running in and out of the room, outside of the courtroom. The court is dismissed, but I've got to catch a flight so I don't miss a third flight because of this trial. So I'll update you from my taxi. This is how long it's taking to figure out whether he should be held in contempt of court. Okay, she later says. Judge will issue a written decision on contempt. She did not rule today, so we're still left in suspense, but repeatedly tore into Kobach over his behavior and his office's implementation of her preliminary injunction. And this is why I was so happy to see this thing finally in court. Out in the court of public opinion, Kobach just simply gets to run wild and say whatever he wants, and there's nobody to hold him accountable the way only a judge can in her own courtroom. The biggest issue was whether Kobach had followed up on a verbal promise he'd made that those previously on the suspense list, there it is again, who were now fully registered because of the week preliminary injunction, the 1 week preliminary injunction, would receive postcards with their voting information. In other words, she ordered him to actually make notice to them, give notice to them that they were properly registered and could go ahead and vote. Here's the transcript where he told the judge he'd do that. She's highlighted in yellow, he's in green. This was a telephone conference in October of 2016. Sorry, she says that it's messy, as established. I'm in a car. Now, we'll hold you in suspense for 1 minute rather than try and cram in the entire exchange in that 1 minute, and take a break, come back, and tell you how that exchange went way back when and what happened afterwards. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's just see if we can't finish up with this fun exchange between Chris Kobach and the court that's finally holding him accountable. When we last left off, I was telling you this is a series of tweets by, let's scroll back up to make sure we get it right, Jessica Huseman, who was covering the trial, and it went on for so long that she was forced to leave in the middle of this contempt proceeding against Chris Kobach and tweeted from her taxi on her way to the airport. But here, a callback to the telephone conference between the judge and Kobach in October of 2016. Now, the judge in this conference says, most of us receive these postcards, and these are the postcards that she wants him to send to people who had been improperly suspended from the voting rolls. Send them postcards letting them know that they are A-OK to vote. Most of us receive these postcards through the mail that tells us where our precinct is and where to go to vote. And I was wondering so the 17,000 people, or however many it is, that are going to get the notice, are they going to also receive this postcard? I mean, how will they know where to go to vote? This is her checking on, will you be in compliance with my order? Kobach says, Your Honor, this is Chris Kobach. They will get the same notice that other voters get, that it notifies you of your polling place. And the court is happy with that. Okay, great. It doesn't matter. This is happening at this point in October. They should still be on track for getting the postcards in the mail. Is that correct? He says basically yes. And fast forward to present date. Kobach and his team repeatedly made the argument that the instruction about postcards wasn't in the judge's written order. But as the judge repeatedly pointed out, it didn't need to be. As a licensed attorney, he'd made that representation to the court and was bound by it. And of course, it was a transcribed phone call, but it didn't even have to be transcribed. I mean, that's nice as far as evidence goes, but if you tell a judge in a telephone proceeding that you're going to comply with her order and then you don't, you are in trouble, whether it's in her written order or not. I would not have ordered that, the judge said to Kobach. Why would I order something you told me you'd take care of? In other words, that was the explanation. Why wasn't it in your written order if you really wanted it done? Because you had already assured me it was being taken care of. But you didn't write down that I had assured you that it already was being taken care of. Yeah, I know. Separate issue. Why would I order something that you told me you'd take care of? You are under an ethical obligation to tell me the truth. That's why lawyers are licensed. Yeah, that's true. Brian Caskey, the state's election director, had taken the stand earlier in the hearing. He said he never issued written orders for counties to send postcards to voters who were previously suspended, and he could not recall being told to do so. He said he'd mentioned it in a phone call with counties, and Kobach would later repeatedly claim counties were told and placed all blame on the counties for not following instructions. They could produce no documentation showing counties had been given these instructions. So that's him trying to weasel out from under the contempt order. Or the contempt hearing. He says the judge asked me, are they going to get these postcards saying they're okay to vote and where to go? And Kobach says, yes, just like everybody else in the state, they will get these postcards. Then the judge issues her order, but excludes instructions to send everybody a postcard because he had already promised her in a judicial proceeding that he was going to do that. And then not only did he not do it, he says, oh, well, if it didn't happen, it's someone else's fault. Because I told every one of the, I think, 105 counties that they needed to send out these postcards, and none of them did it, mysteriously. And it's all their fault. And I was very clear with them about how those postcards had to go out. Because as you know, I promised you. All right. Can you show me the letter that instructed them? No. The email? No. You have records of a phone call during which you may have told them. Either one phone call to all of them in a conference call, or 105 separate calls, or some combination thereof, during which you could plausibly claim, because you haven't transcribed the conversations, that you gave them these instructions. No, I don't even have that. So then you have nothing. There's no evidence whatsoever that you told anyone to send out these postcards. And we have the testimony of at least one, the state election director saying, I never sent anything out about this and nobody ever asked me to. And I assume if we brought any one or all of the 105 county election directors, they too would likewise say, I never heard anything about that. That could be, Your Honor. Well, then I'm going to have a hard time not holding you in contempt, I guess. All right. In questions to Kobach that rounded out the hearing, Kobach essentially begged the judge not to find him in contempt. No, I will, I think, instead find you. He repeatedly said the state would do anything the court felt necessary, and they'd have time in the 5 months before the primary to carry out her orders. He also insinuated that his office had a difficult time keeping up with all the new instructions based on the ruling, but as the judge pointed out, the preliminary injunction never changed. The reason for continuing instructions was because Kobach's office kept failing to follow it. The judge told him, in her view, he'd chosen to interpret the preliminary injunction in a way that wasn't fully compliant. I haven't changed any rules, she said. Kobach had just failed to comply until he's called on it. Shortly after she dismissed the court, I asked Kobach for comment. He declined. Worth noting here is this is the second time the ACLU has called for Kobach to be held in contempt. As Dale Ho noted in his opening and closing in this hearing, they withdrew their first motion months ago because Kobach promised he'd fix all the problems, then he didn't. Boy, is it open and shut, it seems to me here. It cannot be overstated how clear it was that the judge had absolutely had it with Kobach's team. More than once, she articulated for the record, for I assume when Kobach appeals, the ways he's failed to follow proper protocol. Mr. Harvard lawyer at that. Anyway, that's all I've got for now. I did successfully make this flight. That is good news. Thanks for tuning in to my insanely long threads for the past few weeks. I lost my running shoes somewhere in Kansas City, so if you all find those, hit me up. All right. Very interesting. Oh, and there's more at the end here. One more observation. Sorry. It's probably not sorry here. It was striking how many people other than himself Kobach sought to blame during this hearing for the postcards not being sent. He tried to throw Brian Caskey under the bus, then the county election officials, who he said didn't follow instructions. At one point, he read to Caskey a list of all the lawyers and paralegals that worked in his office, saying they too could have, perhaps, told Caskey to tell election officials to send out the postcards. Kobach didn't apologize for a misunderstanding or admit wrongdoing or offer plans to correct. He blamed every single elections official he could find and insisted he'd done nothing wrong. Pretty amazing, and it's going to be pretty difficult, I think, to apply having the book thrown at him there, at least in the contempt proceeding. But are these dated? The unrolling was all dated a day ago. I don't know when the tweets actually took place. But, and that's something ThreadReader needs to be able to tell you. But I guess we could pop in on Jessica Huseman's, all that does, it tells me how many other threads of hers have been unrolled. So ThreadReader needs some work in that respect. I guess I'll talk to the app developers. I won't, obviously, but if the app developers are listening, you definitely need to fix that. We'll see. All right, let's see. What else have we on our plate, and any other information that we might want to toss in there, and do so in advance of an anticipated visit from Joan McCarter. Let's see. What happens if he is held in contempt, asks the Warlock. Well, I'm glad you asked. That is a good question. There's a wide-ranging, I should say there's a wide range of possibilities available to judges. And if it's a continuing contempt, in the extreme, what judges can do is essentially order you jailed until you comply with the previous order. I don't know that that would necessarily be appropriate here for a number of reasons, and it's not something that they would tend to do to a prominent and still serving official, of course. But you could, in fact, say until the suspense list is corrected, until the people who need to be notified of their voting rights, that their voting rights have been restored and where they're supposed to vote, are mailed and received by those people, you stay in jail. I don't know if you could do it by received because, maybe somebody's away for a month and they don't get their mail. But certainly until those things are mailed and you can certify it to us and prove to us that you've complied with the order, you stay in jail. That's supposed to motivate you, to motivate your people to do what needs to be done. But short of that, there could be fines. The fines could be levied personally. It wouldn't make any sense necessarily to fine the state if he were acting outside of his authority. But you could, in fact, fine the state or the State Elections Bureau or his office or something like that. But, at the extremes, they could certainly put him in jail. Of course, pending appeal, she probably wouldn't do that. And so basically the answer to the question of what happens to Chris Kobach now, even if the judge intends to hold him in contempt, is he gets to do what he likes to do and dress up in suits and go on television and claim the very opposite of what was just proven in court until finally the appeals run out and the issue is kicked back down to the courtroom it originated in, and the judge says, yeah, you're in contempt. Now I get to decide what to do with you. And it sure would be fun to see him tossed in jail at least for a couple of days. Whether or not he goes in his suit, I don't really care much. Anyway, we'll shift gears now and have Joan McCarter join us, which she's already done. We'll now just acknowledge that Joan McCarter has joined us. How about that? Good morning, Joan.
Good morning.
How you doing?
I think we need to have a petition to the judge to send him to jail.
I think
just
so.
want to see him in jail.
I think he's a flight risk myself.
Yeah.
It's clear that he doesn't have any regard for the power of the court. And I also think basically we should maybe talk to his professors at Harvard. I don't know, maybe some of those guys need to go in the clink too, or encourage him to
I'm not sure that
comply.
he really learned a lot there.
Yeah, I'd like to see his transcripts. I'm not certain that he didn't just cheat his way through it. I don't know how you miss this stuff. and how you think you can get away with, yes, I will do that, Your Honor, and then not do it, and then say, well, you didn't write down that I was supposed to do it. I know, I ordered you verbally, and I transcribed it, and I think you knew that. But apparently this does not register with Chris Kobach. He's really, I mean, we knew the guy was evil based on what he was doing, but I will say these are a very different breed of people. The Trumpsters, and I guess Kobach, sort of a breed all unto himself. I will say I probably assumed, and maybe wrongly, all this time, that as evil as they were by the book in terms of courtroom procedure, and that they knew that they had to listen to judges. And although they always are willing to say, well, the judges are wrong, I always thought it was just posturing. Like, we're going to appeal. The judges were wrong. Not just, the judges aren't even people you're supposed to listen to, and I'm not going to. I mean, yeah. I never really thought that was a possibility. One last question, by the way, from our listener, Warlock, wondering whether or not the state can pay any fines levied against Kobach. It would depend. I guess it depends on who she's finding. If she finds him personally, then no. Although, I guess, again, anything can happen. The state could, in fact, pay the fines, and then they'd have a contempt order against the state.
And it is Kansas.
Yeah. So I guess, again, Warlock, I think, has some very probing questions that I don't know if it's his intention to do this, but he keeps bumping up against the same constitutional gray area, and forcing me to admit that we're in a spot that is impossible to predict the outcome from, because we're talking about one party to these sometimes courtroom proceedings, sometimes not, is entirely and feels entirely unbound by law, the Constitution, or Western civilization's mores and assumptions about everything. If can Chris Kobach murder every voter in Kansas? He could. I mean, it's against the law, and we assume he would go to jail for it. But it's Kansas, and you never know. That's all you can say.
Well, because it would be, not every voter.
Right. But what if it was every voter? Then there would be no judges to send him to jail, and he could do it. Yes. There you go. Would he be sent in jail in Missouri?
With the black and brown voters.
Right. And that may be how he limits things. Right. Or we may never get to trying him because I'm not done yet. There's a lot of voters here, and it takes a very long time to murder some of them.
They'll need the Russians.
Yeah, right. They'll help. They have things that they can send you in the mail, or chemicals that they can use. Right. Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah, that's, well, the last I saw, and I haven't been following it terribly closely, but they think that somehow it was in his car and came through the vents of the car.
Man.
Which would mean it was a powder, which is why, 500 or more people have been exposed.
Yeah, that's actually a large scale.
Carrying it around with them on their clothes, going to all of these places in public.
Yeah, everybody had to wash their clothes, or wherever pub the guy was in, everybody got notices there too. It's a large scale chemical attack that, I don't know, I thought we had some sort of a treaty organization among the, countries around that, say, like the North Atlantic area that took care of things like that, but I guess not. We might not be committed to that anymore anyway.
I don't think that we really are.
No. Well,
we certainly don't have a commander-in-chief who is.
No, he's not sure that there are allies anymore. Allies, that was from World War II. Since then, we haven't had that. I don't think.
Yeah, we don't need those.
Right. So I don't know what he thinks, and I guess here he's also exposed to a weird gray area. I suppose some would argue that we never were committed to Article 5 in the first place, and this just highlights the hypocrisy of the whole thing. But that's a very alternative theory of history.
Yeah.
Back in the real world.
Back in the real world.
Well, we thought it was the real world.
Doing things that have real impact, like calling up Putin and congratulating him on his win.
Yeah.
Even though his national security advisors told him explicitly in a memo not to congratulate Putin on his win?
That was the problem. They wrote it down.
Yeah.
That's not going to work for him.
Well, and the other problem, as Greg said, is that somebody in the White House staff leaked that to the press.
Even though it said do not leak right on it. I'm not certain why they did that.
I saw kind of some smart person, Waitler maybe, speculating last night that this would be an easy exit for McMaster.
Oh, say I can't take it anymore?
Yeah.
Or
to say, I told you expressly, do this. You didn't. Or I said expressly, don't do this, and you did.
Right. I mean,
but I just can't work with this. I'm out of here.
Yeah. So. I don't know. Nobody left after the eclipse, so I'm not sure whether that really bothers those guys or not. Don't look directly at the eclipse. Oh, boy, he did it. Oh, why did you do that? Don't write that down. So I did see somebody else had the better idea. You did it wrong. They put it, a Photoshop do not congratulate into the Chiron of Fox and Friends. That's how you do it. Now I get you. So, well, yeah, that was a pretty startling development from last night. So he not only didn't he heed the warning not to congratulate him, but he also was instructed, hey, you really have to say something about launching a chemical weapons attack on England and possibly poisoning up to 500 people. And that slipped his mind too.
But he also talked about how important it was going to be to work on bilateral processes between the two nations, which was essentially a big screw you, Macron, Merkel, and May, and NATO, and the rest of the world.
Yes.
Basically.
Well, it is funny that and the fact that he also brought up, or allegedly he said he brought up discussions of arms control as well, which that's always great. I'm for that, typically speaking, but it does sort of the first thing that occurred to me after that revelation was this Trump. He's still sort of stuck in the 80s again when he thought he was last cool. And when you talk to the Russians, you talk about arms control and arms reductions. And that hasn't really been the case for quite some time now. Also, by the way, I was a little bit surprised given all the domestic issues swirling around guns and the NRA. Arguably, those are the arms that, keep us free. Why are we negotiating those away again? But thinking that the AR-15 is going to, those we need thousands of. Everybody's got to have dozens on hand. But the weapons we actually use to deter major worldwide and global conflict, allegedly, those we could spare. I think that's generally speaking a good idea if we can also get rid of, if we can also keep the lid on our killing ourselves, that would also be helpful. But it was just very weird and very 80s oriented, and that it would be bilateral was very 80s oriented. And I guess he remembered that that's been a pipe dream of his for a long time. Since the 80s, he's wanted to negotiate arms control treaties with the then Soviets, and he never got to do it.
And Hillary did it, actually, with Medvedev.
Yes. I mean,
so if Hillary could do it.
Yeah, maybe that was part of the reason. It's always a topic, obviously. There's always arms that can be reduced. And not that I trust him to be able to do that, but he could take a stab at it, sure. But I suppose
he's imagining himself as Reagan.
Maybe. I bet if there had been follow-up questions, and why would there be any of those, which arms were you seeking to reduce specifically? That would have been a stumper. The nuclear ones.
And in fact, some enterprising reporter might think about asking Sarah Huckabee Sanders that.
Yeah.
They won't get an answer.
No, or she'll say, no, we weren't going to reduce those. Well, I didn't ask you. I asked you which ones. Not those isn't an answer. What do you mean? I don't know. Go away. Okay.
There probably won't be a White House briefing today for that to happen.
They're going to skip it?
The White House has closed all public events because of the snow.
Sure. Oh, that's a good reason.
And in fact, OPM has closed the federal government because of the snow.
Oh, well, this is a record for closing the government.
Yeah,
here.
and that's
this, it
not
wasn't
even Congress doing it.
Right.
So while the rest of the federal government is shut down, the White House is essentially shut down.
Okay.
Guess what Congress is doing?
What are they doing? Shoveling?
Trying to prevent a shutdown.
Oh. Boy, it's like they don't, well, right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. It's already shut, guys.
It's kind of like, isn't it?
But okay, a little shoveling, a little salt could open it up again, only to be shut down for lack of money.
Friday midnight.
Wow, I didn't even realize we were back at it.
We're back at it.
Ugh,
You haven't
okay.
been reading me, Kagro.
I haven't been reading anything. I've been poring over Cambridge Analytica stories trying to get a handle on this thing. Okay.
Of which I have left entirely to Mark. I just see the
Yeah.
top lines and haven't been in the weeds in that one at all.
You got to choose one or the other. There's no time.
Well, there are so many moving parts to the omnibus spending bill.
Ah,
I keep thinking of it as the ominous.
yes, well, it is that as well.
$1.3 trillion, which deficits really matter these days.
Yeah,
we do
sure.
probably need $1.3 trillion in spending. We didn't need $2 trillion in tax cuts. But, that's neither here nor there at this point because we got them. So what they are doing today is still in the House trying to get this spending bill passed. Ugh. Having decided that having 72 hours to review a bill, to have it published and for members to review, that's an artificial deadline, according to Paul Ryan.
Oh, well, yeah, right. The read the bill guys.
The read the bill guys. So at some point today, probably, they'll have the final text of the $1.3 trillion spending bill for everyone to review to vote on early tomorrow, maybe, so they can rush it over to the Senate, where the Senate can maybe rush it through. We don't know yet, because Rand Paul hasn't said whether he's going to give his consent in the unanimous consent request to rush it through.
Well, probably because he wants to try to read it, because honestly, the thing you do with these, and the reason that they say, oh, you got to have 72 hours is because they know that if you don't, you can put things in there like, unanimous consent is deemed on anything, on any of the things that Rand Paul is thinking of filibustering or whatever. Any number of things you can sneak into an omnibus bill of hundreds of pages if you don't give anybody any chance to read it. And then, so I guess Monday's coverage will be about all of those things that we discover over the weekend.
Yeah. It's possible, excuse me, that they don't have it done by Friday midnight and we get another, 2-3 day bill so that they can work over the weekend.
All right. That's the usual patch, and it wouldn't be surprising, I guess, to see them resort to that. At least not shocking. It would be surprising.
There are so many moving parts to this that it would not be surprising at all.
All right. Well, we may expect that. Do you get any sense for what the odds are that they would just simply do a short-termer and come back next week? Or
50-50, I'd say at this point.
Okay.
The last thing they seem to be fighting over is expanded background checks for gun sales, which may happen, but Republicans have been insisting that if that goes in, then they get their nationally recognized concealed carry permits. That they have to be, states' concealed carry permits have to be reciprocal nationwide.
Yes.
Which Democrats are not really on board with. So
right. It doesn't make any particular sense. Leave it, as they say, leave it to the states unless the states don't do what we want, in which case, leave it to me.
At this point, it looks like none of the really horrible stuff Republicans were trying to force is going to happen. But that means none of the good things Democrats were trying to force are going to happen.
All right.
We will not have any Obamacare stabilization efforts. But on the other hand, we won't have any measures that would essentially make selling health insurance with abortion coverage a thing.
Yes, right.
Um,
All right.
We don't have protection for dreamers,
Yes.
but there isn't funding for a border wall. Or, at this point, luckily, more funding for ICE officers.
Okay. I could see that. Yeah, all right. So, I mean, I guess what we should probably do is, I guess we could go on for some time listing the bad things that didn't happen. That's true. But it is interesting. I mean, it's like they're making no progress whatsoever. What are they doing? I mean, the last time we kicked this spending bill and the government closure down the road, it was because they hadn't settled these things. And so now we're back at not settling
Without
them.
these things
That's all
being
it says.
settled.
Huh. Okay, well, let's take a short break and not settle anything and then come back and do it all over again. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're trying to figure out the details of what's going on and what do we have nailed down and what we don't with respect to the possible. I don't even know what to call it now. It's not really. It's still not a budget deal. It never was, and it's only possibly something more than a few days worth of spending. But if they have it right, how long would this latest bill carry us even? What's the date on it? Do you know that? I shouldn't ask you what I don't know.
A year's worth.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, it takes them through the beginning of 2019. I mean, we're past like a year and a half, I think.
Okay.
Fiscal year versus calendar year,
right, okay.
and counting the part of this fiscal year that's already been shot with continuing resolutions, I think it's 2 fiscal years. But that just would be at this point a year and a half.
Okay.
Does that make
Calendar
sense?
Year and a half. Maybe. Was there a date in it anywhere, or did?
At some point there was a date, and now I don't remember
All right. No,
that date. It's hard to
yeah.
keep track of.
It
all
is
of
hard. I'm sorry we got to that because we were just talking about. Well, all right. If you don't remember this detail, maybe we'll skip to something else. But we skipped to something else that was also hard to remember. Unfortunately. Okay.
Well, no, it's just the 2018 spending package. So
Okay.
it's just
FY 2018. So.
Oh lordy.
That would, of course, be fiscal year 2018 ends in October of 2018. Yeah. Calendar year 2018, of course, famously ending at the end of December 2018. Currently speaking, unless Trump issues some sort of order that we don't know about, changing that, which he could, in case Warlock is wondering. I don't think that's actually within his power, but he could issue anything he wants, I guess. If he gets his hands on a crayon, we're doomed. All right, so let's see.
So I did find out we increased spending on the military by $80 billion and on domestic programs by $63 billion. It's sort of coming back to me that they decided on these levels to put aside the sequester fight for 2 years, although this is just the 1-year budget. If I'm remembering correctly from this deal that they made in December was it December? No. When was the last government shutdown?
I don't know.
I can't keep up with these
The
people.
actual shutdown. Good
We've had
question.
5 of them this fiscal year.
Actual shutdowns or
the
just
6th.
taking us to the brink of shutdowns, or what are we counting?
We have actually had 5 continuing resolutions, not shutdowns, but we've had
Okay.
5 continuing resolutions.
Yes, each one a rescue package from a threatened shutdown.
We'll
So we have
probably, maybe 50-50 have another one that lasts this weekend.
So that's a lot.
That's
And
a lot.
it's
That's a
become
lot.
far more
Here's
often
your
it's the
regular
norm.
reminder that Republicans are not capable of governing.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, remember that this was supposed to be the return to regular order. That was the promise. And I guess the guy who was most interested in that is not around to see this collapse, but I'm sure he's watching from afar. But allegedly, John McCain was apoplectic over the breakdown of regular order.
Apoplectic.
Yeah, that's a big word.
Yeah. And by the way, during the break, we found Rand Paul declaring in the royal we that we haven't decided if we're going to shut down government.
Okay. He and
Himself.
okay. Fine. I guess so. That's I guess that would do. All right. So he hasn't decided. He hasn't yet combed over the details and found something objectionable to say.
Well, he does object to the total amount of spending. $80 billion on domestic, on military programs, $63 billion on domestic. That's way, way, way too much money
Yeah.
for Rand Paul,
He still
who was
cares,
absolutely fine with the
apparently.
tax bill, by the way.
Yeah, that was more, but it was not.
Speaking of the tax bill,
Oh yes.
this is good. One of the errors they had in it, you know that writing a tax bill on a napkin and scrawling stuff in the margins is not a very good way to legislate.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots and lots of errors in that. So one of the errors they were trying to fix in this omnibus bill was something called the grain giveaway or something. I don't know what they called it. It would give grain producers who sell their grain to co-ops a massive tax break. Like they wouldn't have to pay any taxes. But grain producers who did not sell to co-ops would still have to pay their taxes. So this creates an imbalance in the agriculture sector. Big problem. Farm state Republicans are freaking out about it. Farm state Democrats are freaking out about it. So they come to an agreement on what to do.
Yeah.
They fix that little piece of the tax bill in return for an expansion of the low-income housing tax credit, which is what Democrats have asked for. Simple trade-off. Paul Ryan unilaterally says no.
Reason? Any idea?
Because he's Paul Ryan?
He just doesn't want any tax credits at all for low income.
I think probably he doesn't want any low income housing tax credits.
Yes,
I think he doesn't want anything that will help any poor person.
I guess
even if it
not.
means screwing over farm state Republicans, farmers in Wisconsin, because he's Paul Ryan.
Well, what a guy.
What a guy.
I don't know what to. Yeah, I don't know what. I'm not certain about the. I'm unclear on the politics of selling to co-ops versus not. I mean, I don't think I have the background to figure that one out.
But according to people who look at this, they say that's a huge problem in the agricultural industry. And the way the language is written, it might not just apply to grain producers. It could be anybody selling any of their crop to a co-op.
Okay.
So
why would it possibly just be applicable to grain? How difficult is that to do?
You know, every farmer could decide,
done.
I can get this huge tax break and I will only sell my stuff to the co-op.
Yeah. Is that
not putting it out there on the regular market?
And I mean, at first, I mean, again, approaching it with no understanding of the background of like Selling to the co-op. Co-ops, they're good, right?
They're good.
We
I
want
think
that.
probably on a smaller scale, it's good.
Yeah.
They're calling it the grain glitch.
But how could they call it the grain glitch if the language is too unclear so that anybody could... I don't understand how they could not get this done right. I mean, either put the word grain in it or don't. And I would love to know what's the problem with this. So now sell anything to anybody. All right, fine. I have all those Beanie Babies I never sold on eBay. Boom. Co-op. No taxes. No. We said, you said grain. No, you said nothing. You said just anybody who sells anything. Wow, that's a huge oversight. Why did I do that?
For the smaller farmer, it might not be a bad idea for this. I mean, it might really help small farmers.
I would guess.
It's probably not as great for corporate farms, and corporate farms are the ones who get to actually weigh in on these things with their members of Congress.
Okay. Well, it makes things a little bit clearer. In other words, somebody somewhere, like maybe a Democrat on the Agriculture Committee, thought it would be a good idea and figured they could get Republicans to go along with it if it was. Well, farmers will have to pay less taxes. You'll like that.
Yeah.
And it might just genuinely have been originally, yes, small farmers, if they sell their grain to co-ops, which are a good thing, generally speaking, they pay less taxes. And it's only controversial because ConAgra places are saying, well, what about the grain I sell? I want to pay no taxes on that. Why are you favoring small farmers against giant corporations? I don't know. Why are we doing that? Say the Republicans.
Because that's what we always do.
Yeah. Well, all right. Very interesting. Odds that holds things up at the end, though, I guess not very great.
Not very great. Oh, and the other thing that they are not going to be doing is revamping Congress's sexual harassment policies.
What, does that need work?
Does that need work?
I didn't realize that is a huge problem. Yeah. So they're not revamping that, and which means, I guess, that they can continue paying settlements to people they've harassed with taxpayer money. Is that?
Yeah, that's what it means.
That's well.
Yeah.
Sure.
This is something that really needs to happen. Yeah. Here's our problem. They are already saying, okay, this is your last chance, guys, for any legislation that you think needs to happen in 2018. You got to stuff it into this omnibus bill because we're not going to do anything besides confirmations after this, essentially. And naming post offices, probably.
Okay.
So all of these critical things, like the DREAM Act, like not using taxpayer money to pay off sexually harassed staffers, needed to happen in this bill. And it's not.
Yeah, and none of the things. I mean, the whole point of this was that the reason we kept moving from shutdown threat to shutdown threat was they said, well, we'll pass something temporary and then fix it all later, and then none of it gets fixed, none of it gets fixed, none of it gets fixed. Even things as simple as, should we use taxpayer money to pay people when we sexually harass them? Let me think about that. I don't know. I was puzzled with the grain thing a minute ago. This is really tough. On the one hand, I shouldn't sexually harass anybody. On the other hand, if it's free, shouldn't I really be doing that? Okay. Well, that's...
And speaking of that...
Yes.
We still don't know if Blake Farenthold has repaid the $84,000.
I'll take 80 even. I'll let you go for the 4 or 6, 7.
I think it's 84.
Okay. Well, why don't we make that the floor then? You have to pay at least 84,000.
The guy from Texas.
With the pajamas.
In his pajamas. But he may not run for Congress again. He may retire. So.
Okay. Maybe. That's a maybe. As is, I'll pay you back, I guess.
Yeah.
How do we find out if he's back?
The last time I checked, it was unclear whether or not he had repaid the money, which I think is pretty much saying, no, he hasn't.
I would think so because, Well, I don't know. Do you make a press release out of that? If you're not running again, I guess. And even if you are, I paid. You probably do it quietly. But it occurs to me, I don't even know where to go to find out if it was paid. Like, do you have? That's what we should be doing. We send somebody to Congress to just go to the front desk there. Where is the sexual harassment payoff office? Where do they keep the balance on that? I got to go there. I want to find out if anybody who sexually harassed people on the taxpayer's dime is paid up yet.
See, this is how do you find that out? How do you know that?
I don't.
If they don't tell you.
That's a good question, and I don't know what office would be responsible for it. And certainly, if it has anything to do with the ethics committee, they won't tell you.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. And I mean, it's like we should have opened an account publicly somewhere. You could pay any way you want, Bitcoin, okay, but we'll all get a push text notification when the money goes in. That's how we should have set that one up.
I like that
Opt
idea.
in, you don't have to.
But I don't think they should be able to pay it with Bitcoin.
Oh.
Because I don't really know what Bitcoin is. So.
Oh, well, there is that problem. But there's a lot of that something coin going around. In fact, I read, and I will never understand this one. But just in passing, I see that I guess the United States had imposed some sanctions on Venezuela recently, and that the Russians helped the Venezuelans launch their own cryptocurrency, somehow aimed at getting around American sanctions against them, which I don't even know how to feel about that because I don't know what the hell it means.
I don't know what it means.
It's getting around sanctions. That's bad. On the other hand, Trump imposed them, so maybe that's good, but I'm not sure. Usually we sanction people for decent reason, but we're
Russia
constantly
helping them get around the sanctions. Yeah.
And then it's cryptocurrency, and that's not good. And or maybe it's not good. Some people love it. I have no idea. But this is how bizarre things are getting. And of course, I imagine there would be no Trump response to that, but I don't know if I can fault him really because I have no response to it. I wouldn't know what to say. And maybe I don't even want him touching that. We could be bombing somebody before it's all finished, and I maybe don't want to set him out on that path. But between that and congratulations on, stealing an election and
the invitation to steal the next one?
Yes, and steal ours as well.
Yeah.
And no problem with that chemical attack over there. And by the way, getting around our sanctions. It's all good. And I don't know. At this point, I don't know why. What you do with this, except to say, I mean, that's pretty damn close to, just straight up aid and comfort as they list the problems in the treason statute. But
it pretty much is.
Yeah.
And we don't have a Congress that cares.
No.
I'm veering off into conspiracy theory and paranoia a little bit in looking at Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and seeing them not really freaking out about their electoral prospects for 2018.
Personally, their own?
No,
I mean, not
for
for
their
Mitch McConnell,
bodies,
okay.
For their chambers. It doesn't seem like they really think
That's true.
that Republican rule is in jeopardy.
Others are freaking out or said to be freaking out, but and I mean professionally, I guess it would normally be their role to be steady about these things, but still.
But they aren't doing anything that's good.
Well, that was never going to change.
This screwing over grain producing states, farmers.
Yeah. I suppose it may just be that they just think nothing. Well, I mean, it's odd to serve your life in Congress and to think
maybe
nothing.
they think Russia's going to save it for them in November, is what I am saying.
That is disturbing to say the least.
It
You'd
is
think
disturbing,
they would be more worried.
we have
willing to say
seen
it.
them be very obstructive
Yes.
toward any efforts for certainly the Obama administration to say, hey, look, Russia's problem. We've seen Paul Ryan basically fire the guy that's the head of the Elections Commission that has been working to help states fight cyber warfare.
Yeah.
It kind of looks like congressional leadership might just be okay with Russia interfering in 2018.
Maybe. Well, they certainly
As
did
they
everything.
were okay with them interfering in
Yeah.
2016.
Right. They did everything to indicate that they were okay with that. They had every opportunity to say something. They were aware of the Russian record of meddling in Western elections and Western democracies and said, okay.
Oh, well.
I mean, it's terrible when it happens to all those other people. Somehow that's interesting. It's backwards. What a backwards way of approaching it. It's awful that it happened in Ukraine. Now, if it happens here, that's not so bad.
Right. I keep going back to that transcript of the secret meeting of House leadership.
Yeah.
The famous "we're all family here, no leaks, no leaks." After that whole discussion, they've been talking about a briefing they just had about Russia's interference in Ukraine and in other Western states, and talking about how awful it is and what Russia has been doing. And my God, can you believe this? And the propaganda. And then we've got the Kevin McCarthy. There are two people I think Putin has on his payroll.
Yes, right.
And it all shuts down. No leaks, no leaks.
Yeah. That is remarkable to say the least.
Remarkable recording that I'm glad somebody made.
But mostly forgotten at this point. And you've done a great job in reminding us of it about weekly, really.
Because
I'm
hoping
that will
scared
come
about
back.
the 2018 election.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. A lot of these stories sort of cycle back around again, and people, for whatever reason, think that they're brand new all over again. Like, for instance, as we were talking about in the earlier part of the show with Greg, the Cambridge Analytica story really was hanging out there for a year or more in some cases, some parts of it, and we read them some of the time on the air and discussed them and said this is awful, and then we moved on to other things. People were suing the president for sexually harassing them or whatever. Easy to distract us with this, but the Cambridge Analytica story, as we pointed out earlier in the week, was in The Intercept this time, March 2017. Only the number was 30 million users, not 50 million users. But otherwise, all of the essential elements were there. And then, as Greg reminded us, the story of using personality testing and those stupid apps that were available voluntarily on Facebook and then harvesting all that information from you and all your friends was reported in November of 2016. And we've just been sitting here like looking at our hands. So I don't know. Maybe it comes back around, and at some point in the spring or summer, I don't know, maybe election season, fall, after, won't break until after Labor Day. Maybe that's it. And then we find out, huge blockbuster. Did you know that the Republicans were taped discussing that they thought the Russians were paying Donald Trump? No, I didn't know that, except I did. And it
is hard when there is so much news.
Yes.
To keep the important stuff up at the top.
I guess that is true.
But at the same time, if anybody's going to bring Trump down, I'm thinking it's Stormy Daniels.
She's doing very well with it, I must say.
She's doing really well. And I think Stormy Daniels is probably the perfect opponent to Trump.
Yeah.
Because what has she got to lose?
Right. And she's been at this for a while. She was aiming too low when she was just thinking about David Vitter. People have forgotten that that was where most of us, I guess, first, well, maybe I shouldn't say where most of us first heard her name. I'm assuming too much, perhaps, about the audience. They may be film fans, for instance.
They might be.
You know what? Unrelated.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, absolutely. It's a business like any other. We just hope that everybody is properly vetted and participating voluntarily. That's the most you can hope for, I think. An unrelated but oddly somehow my mind wanders to it. I just saw a tweet go by when we're talking about things that were otherwise obvious or were once obvious but that took us a long time to figure out. I see now that the bombing suspect in Austin was posting on Reddit, not a terrible surprise, under the username, you're never going to guess.
I'm going to blow stuff up?
Very close. Austin Bomber. Now,
oh, Lord.
Come on. Yeah, you probably, although on Reddit, my first instinct would be to say that's somebody with a terrible sense of humor and they're just being inappropriate and they're trolling. Right. But I guess that's where we are at this point. You can now go to Reddit, 4chan, all these other places and say, that's me. I'm the Austin Bomber. I'm doing it. And there's a 50-50 chance that that's true and a confession. And, but we don't need to do anything about it or whatever. I mean, I don't know how you regulate that. You can't, if we swept up everybody who said something stupid like that, well, actually, if we did that, we'd probably do. What am I saying?
If you just did it on, say, I don't know, Twitter.
Yeah, that would probably.
You just did it with accounts from prominent people.
Yeah, well, maybe.
You could sweep some of those up.
I guess so. So I'm a little worried about the constitutional implications of it, but it's only if we have a constitution, and I'm not certain that we do. All right. Well, that was an odd bit of news, and so what? Let's see. By way of bringing it back around to what we were actually discussing, though, what do we look for going forward in the day? And so Congress will be working on this today, despite the shutdown, and they have until Friday, right?
Right.
Okay. Did they move it to noon this time, or is it back at midnight?
It's back at midnight. It was nice when it was Thursday, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I have a feeling I'm going to have another ruined weekend.
Yeah, most likely. Although maybe a lot of flights out of D.C. are being canceled or something, and they don't care as much. I'm curious why that experiment didn't come back. Was it really that much of a failure? I don't think so. I think it worked.
I don't think so either.
Maybe that was why we want it to be panicky and failure. It should always have the the lingering stench of failure on it. That's how we get things done here. That is odd that they decided not to go back to that. Okay. So we'll watch. There's nothing else to do. You might as well turn on C-SPAN unless you're shoveling.
Right. Well, we've got the Senate also talking about another really bad internet bill.
Oh.
SESTA, the sex trafficking bill that really doesn't stop online sex trafficking, but instead could make all internet platforms really, really, really paranoid and censoring their users. It's another bill where they're taking a sledgehammer to what requires a scalpel.
Okay. Would it have helped with
that's what they're taking up in the Senate today. It passed 97 to 2 or whatever, 96 to 2. Cloture. So they're doing amendments on that today. Wyden has a few, so hopefully he's restricting that a little bit, and hopefully it'll get better.
I hope so. There's a tough position to be in,
opposing the bill to limit online sex trafficking. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But, once again, these are not the people who should be trying to do stuff about the internet because they don't understand it.
That's true, and they benefit by its misuse very greatly, personally, both in their elections and, probably, I don't have any proof, but odds are somebody voting on this somewhere in the House of Representatives has a personal interest, too much personal interest in sex trafficking, let's say. I'm just guessing that that's the case, and maybe it's Farenthold. I don't know. Don't know for sure. And there's no way to prove it, and there's no way to not prove it either. I'm just saying some investigation would be wise. Boy, it's good we don't have a legal department here. They'd be so upset. if you can't get arrested as posting as Austin Bomber, I don't see why I should have anything to worry about. So
you have nothing to worry about. I'm
all right.
Sure.
Thank you. Excellent. I will then, therefore, see you next week when I'm not in prison.
When hopefully we have a government.
Yeah, I hope that next week you and I are not in prison and Chris Kobach is. That would be great.
For.
And I guess we have a fair shot at that. Thank you for coming by, Joan.
You're welcome. Next week.
And yeah, I hope you don't have any more snow there in Idaho either, like we're getting. So I don't know. Is there a possibility? We'll find out. All right. Well, we'll check back in. It's probably a blizzard there at this point. Let's pass the microphone then now on to Justice for his follow-up program, and I can actually tell you a little bit about what's coming up next if I give myself enough time. How about I start now? Former Congressperson Barbara Lee speaks for me, that would be Justice, and maybe for me too, as she rips into Betsy DeVos for her careless attitude toward racism in U.S. schools. I'll get on board with that. A private mercenary firm is making millions off the tragedies in Houston, Puerto Rico, and Standing Rock. And a little bit, how about Mark Zuckerberg
From
next?
Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman.
Mark Zuckerberg, how could he possibly be in the news? Well, it turns out he sold more Facebook stock in the last 3 months than any insider at any other company in the same time period. And in a bid to directly compete against Russia, Chinese surveillance and tech giant Alibaba has joined ALEC, believe it or not.